So we're hoping that so far we've helped inform you about addiction and about recovery and what resources are available. But it's important to go beyond the facts and figures too and actually hear the stories about the realities of addiction and how it impacts and even takes so many lives.
Kim Jones is one of the lucky ones. After a debilitating battle with drugs, she's been clean for 8 years. Her story is filled with heartache, but ends with hope, as we hear from Delmarva Life's Katie Zarilli.
For Kim Jones, the only way out of addiction was being arrested.
I remember when I saw the blue and red lights, like for me, it was just like, thank God, I'm going to survive this and I never have to touch a drug or alcohol, again. And up until that point, I had no idea how I was going to get clean.
The day she describes as both horrific and life-saving was in 2012. The addiction started long before that. Growing up in a comfortable home, getting a good education, she never imagined her future would have anything to do with drugs. But when a family member first introduced her to alcohol, she got a taste of something she liked.
It wasn't okay just to drink a couple of beers. I wanted to be drunk, and then eventually some experimentation with some drugs, and then eventually harder drugs started too.
Before that experimentation could get to the next level, Kim met a man, got married, and had children. She had mouths to feed instead of the habit. But when her marriage ended in her mid-30s, she went into a severe depression. Instead of getting help, she turned to people and partying. She started doing cocaine, then crack cocaine, then heroin, then IV drugs.
My life just spiraled out of control, and despite all these red flags and the warnings from family and friends and people trying to intervene in my life, I just wasn't accepting of the information that they were trying to provide me or the help that they were trying to provide. And the addiction had just taken over so severely that I couldn't see the logic in what they were saying.
She eventually lost her kids, her job, and her home. She was homeless in Florida. All she knew to do to survive was to commit crimes.
One, I had drugs to feed my habit because at that point it was more important for me just to forget about how awful my life was versus really feeding the addiction. But two, I needed to eat and I needed a place to stay. And I was in a town where I didn't know who to turn to for help.
Helpless, hopeless, she thought the only way out was death.
There were many, many days where I prayed that I would just overdose and die. And I really thought, my addicted brain back then really thought that was going to be the best thing for my family.
But she didn't die. In fact, it was through being handcuffed that the chains of addiction began to break.
Was just lost, and struggling and hoping somebody would come to my rescue. And, I never expected it to be the police, and serving time in prison. But ultimately, that is what saved my life.
While being in prison, Kim got the long-term treatment she so desperately needed. It took time, but she remembers starting to feel like herself again.
I started speaking differently and started using correct grammar and writing differently and all of those kinds of things that I hadn't done for quite some time.
She was released in 2014, and now, years later, looking back, she doesn't recognize that person she once was, the person who left her family to fuel the addiction.
In my driveway, and I was getting ready to leave, and my son was about 9 years old at the time, and he was with me, and he said, "Mommy, please don't leave. I need you." And I looked at my own child right in the face and said, "You'll be fine." And I left. And I didn't see him for almost 4 years after that. And so that was definitely the lowest point. The trauma and the other experiences that I had to deal with pale in comparison to knowing how badly I hurt him.
But those relationships have been repaired, and Kim both works and volunteers in the field of helping those in the throes of addiction.
Being able to give back and help other people in recovery is really what keeps me grounded and, allows me to contribute back and hopefully in some way make amends to people that I'm no longer able to make amends to.
Living her best and happiest life now, I asked Kim if, given the opportunity, whether or not she'd go back and rewrite her story.
I really like who I am today. And I'm not sure that I would be the person I am today had I not gone through those experiences.
A story of darkness defeated, one that ignites inspiration, and one that proves that having hope starts with getting help.
We asked Kim what she thinks will help solve the problem of addiction. She says it's going to take fewer opioid prescriptions, shattered stigmas, and investment in longer-term treatment. And I know it can't be easy to go out and talk about it like that, to talk about how it affected your children, but I think that's what we need. And my hat goes off to her.
Absolutely.